Hello, in this video we're going to demonstrate how to use fonts with JavaFX. So we're going to write a program that does a whole bunch of things. This is going to be another long video. But we're going to look at how we can get all the fonts that are installed on a system and use them. And we're going to look at how we can manipulate font properties in JavaFX. Basically, we're going to write a program that allows the user to preview different fonts. So let's get started. In Eclipse, we'll create a new Java project, and I will call this font preview. We'll add a new class to this, also called font preview, and we'll maximize this to give us some space. Now, our class is going to extend from application, like all of our JavaFX programs. And before we write our start method, we're going to have some member variables that we're going to need. So we're going to be setting the width and height of the window. And we're actually going to store this. So private double pane width, and we'll set this to initialize this to 480. Another one for the height, we'll initialize this to 250. Next up, we're going to declare a label object or a label node that we're going to render to the screen, and what we're going to do is manipulate the font properties of our label so that we can preview different fonts, or whether it's bold or italic and so on. So we're going to have a label. We'll call this label, and we just need some text in here. So we'll have the string programming is fun. Alright, so next up we're going to have a combo box, and we're going to use the combo box to select our font, our typeface. So private combo box, and this will store strings, and we'll call this CBO font name default constructor. So we'll initialize this straight away. We need our import there. We're also going to have another combo box for the font size, and this is going to store integer objects. Alright, next up we're going to use a couple of checkboxes to allow the user to select whether the font is going to be bold or italic. So this is the checkbox class. One for bold and one for italic. Okay, so they are all the member variables that we need for this program. So now let's write our start method. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is create a border pane to store some of our components. We'll call this pane, use the default constructor, and we'll set our label to the middle of the border pane. So set center can be our label. Okay, so next up we're going to get our list of fonts. Now luckily the font class has a couple of static methods that make this very easy for us. So what we're going to have to start with is a list, which is going to store strings I should say, and this will be our font names. And the way we get all the fonts that are currently installed is with font dot get families. Alright, and that's all we need. So now we have a list of all the fonts that we're going to use. So we're going to add all these to our combo box. So we get the items that are currently stored in our combo box, and then we add our list of font names. So now our combo box contains the names that are stored in this list. Perfect. what we're going to do now is set the current selected item to be the first font. So cbo font name dot set value to be our first font. So we get the first element from our font names list. So now what we're going to do is set up our font size combo box, and we're going to use a loop to do this. All we need to do is add a whole bunch of numbers to represent our font sizes. So we're going to have a for loop. We'll start with I equal to 1, which is a very small font. I less than or equal to 100, which is quite a large font. Increment I along the way. So all we're going to do is get our font size combo box, get the list of items, and then add I. So we're going to add all the font sizes from 1 through to 100. And we're going to set the initial value to be 1. So next up, we're going to create a horizontal box to store this stuff that we just created. So hbox, use 10 as the parameter to the constructor, and then we're going to add our font name and our font size combo boxes along with some labels for them. So hbox dot get the children that are stored in our hbox, and then we're going to add all, and we're going to add a new label first, which says font name. We're going to add our combo box for our font name. We're going to add a new label again for a font size, and we're going to add our CBO font size combo box. Okay, next up we're going to set the alignment of our hbox to be pos.center. And we'll add this to our pane that we created right up at the start of this method, and we'll set it to the top. To be our hbox. Okay, what we're going to do now is set up our checkboxes, and all we need to do now is have another horizontal box. We'll call this hbox2, and we are going to add our 2 checkboxes. CHK bold, CHK italic. We'll set the alignment of our horizontal box. And we'll add this to the bottom of our border pane. So what we'll do now is set up our primary stage and our scene. Okay, now we'll quickly create our main method. And with that, we can run our program just to see where things stand. So let's run this. And you can see what we have so far is a good start. We've got our list of all the fonts that are installed on my computer. Quite a few, as you can see. And we've got our font size combo box. However, nothing happens when we change this. Nothing happens when we click these checkboxes either. We need to add some listeners now. Luckily, we know what we're doing for this. So what we're going to do is create another method inside our class. And because what we want to do is no matter what property the user selects, whether it's changing the font name, changing the size, or changing whether it's bold or italic, we want to make sure that everything is set correctly. So we're going to have a new method called setFont. So what we're going to have in here first is a font weight. The font weight class is used to specify whether it's bold or not bold and so on. You'll see what I mean. But anyway, we need a font weight variable and we'll call this weight. So what we're going to do is check whether our bold checkbox is selected. If it is, we're going to set the font weight to bold. Otherwise, we set it to normal. So if the check bold dot is selected, if our checkbox is selected, we are going to set our weight to, so you can see here there's black, bold, extra light, and so on. We want bold. Otherwise, we set our weight to equal font weight dot normal. All right, we're going to do a very similar thing with our italic checkbox. We don't want the weight though. What we use for italics is a class called font posture. Okay, and so what we're going to do is if our italic checkbox is selected, then our posture equals font posture. So you can see here we have regular or italic. Otherwise, set it to regular. Alright, what we're going to do now is set the font of our label. So label dot set font. So you can see here, this takes a font object as the value. So what we need is a font object, and the way we do this is by using the static method font inside the font class, which basically builds a font object for us. So the one we want, firstly, we get the first parameter to the constructor is the name of the font. So we get that from our combo box by getting the value. Next up, we set the weight and the posture and the size. So we need to get that from our font size combo box. Okay, so now that our set font method has been created, we need to use this. And so what we're going to do is add some action listeners to all of the inputs that we've just created. So our two combo boxes and our two checkboxes. So cbo font name dot set on action. We'll use a lambda, and all we're going to do in here is call set font like that. So we can copy and paste this because the code is exactly the same for each of these. So what I'm going to do is cheat a little bit and steal our variable names so I don't have to type them again. So now we've got a listener for each of our inputs, and we have our set font method which figures out exactly what parameters we need to pass in to our label set font method. So with that, let's run this program. It starts off looking exactly the same. However, when I change the font, there we go. I must have missed one. Oh no, here we go. Now this is very small. Let's make this a lot bigger so we can see what's going on. Let's try 48. Okay, so there's our airplane font. If I set this to bold and italic, nothing happens. My guess, though, is that this font doesn't support bold or italic. I've got a few interesting fonts installed that don't support all of the properties, but let's find one that will. For example, Arial. Bold works fine, italic works fine. See, because we're using checkboxes, we get the combination as well. So we can try all these different fonts. Yeah. So what we've done really in this video has created a font preview program, which is actually really useful. Everyone's favorite font. There we go. Let's end on Comic Sans, shall we? With that, that's it for this video, really. And we did quite a lot. We looked at how we can obtain the list of fonts that are available for us to use in our programs. And we've looked at how we can populate these in combo boxes, same as size. And then we've used all these inputs from the user to actually modify how the text gets displayed on the screen. So we're actually changing the fonts of our label. We're changing the weight and the posture and the size. So with that, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.